Okay, so that's just a little bit of a walkthrough of the show so far. But, one of the things that I really have been thinking about with the show is the idea of communication and transformation of information. So this, I think, comes about through both of the artists' work. We see Alejandro's work and the way that he's incorporating these sort of monstrous forms, these sort of alien/human-like bodies that are never quite one or the other, but yet they're almost reduced to a pattern. And then we think about the spaces that he's putting these figures into that are so tied to the concrete world. So we think about this one with these Mies van der Rohe chairs, in a space that almost looks like this perfect mid-century modern dream house. This open sky, this perfectly clear day. And yet it's both familiar and distant. And then we have this tie to the real world here, the artist working in the studio, while still kind of captured in this gazing ball that is, with this alien-esque form that's kind of wrapped around it. And on a chair that looks familiar yet somehow strange. And I think the same thing of Ante's work. So I think this is a really perfect example. This piece here, Talismanic 2000. So this piece, looks almost so close to like a Brancusi newborn form or the sleeping head of the Muse. But yet in this egg-like form that's sitting low on this concrete pedestal, this really brilliantly white concrete pedestal, he's incorporating both the shape of the egg and this part that's pulled from a car. So this section here is actually the casting of the headlamp housing unit from his car that he's slowly been taking apart piece by piece and casting into different works that you'll find throughout his shows and exhibitions. And I love the echo here that you see of that, again, high modernist dream that's kind of been corrupted and pulled into the real world, this idea of sort of the end of the utopia. Again, this familiar form of the chair. And the reference to the studio. Through this elongated alien flower. When we get to this one, we see these pieces of these figures in repose. Almost calm, but yet there's something quite unnerving about them in a way, despite how beautiful the spaces are. And Alejandro is quite adept with this new style of painting that he's incorporating. These really soft, brushy applications that are somewhere between, providing accurate textures of wood and reflections, but then also keeping that looseness. And then when I think about gesture, I come back to this piece of Ante's. So this one is called coup d'oeil, which its literal translation means a cut of the eye. However, the sort of idiomatic expression is to take a glance. And so this piece continues that series that is pulled of parts from the automotive series, where this one you can see is the casting of the side view mirror, where he's taken it out of that context on the side of the door, but instead incorporated into this kind of leg-like form that we see that follows. So in its own way, becoming this kind of monstrous character or figure that changes as you move around the space. And I love the echo to this Alejandro Cardenas piece, where you also have this idea of the mirror. So here we have the actual rear view mirror and Alejandro's gazing ball where the figure looks back onto itself. And then we have here Aspira by Ante Lu. So this piece is not from a car part, but rather another commercially produced consumer object that Ante had found. So this comes from a handheld vacuum. So here he's taken a casting of the form, but left remnants of it that are still quite identifiable, such as this sort of open mouthpiece here, which becomes, the nozzle of the vacuum. And leading it here where you see literally the switches that turn it on. But he's opened it up and contorted the forms of it, kind of defamiliarizing this object that we've seen so many times. And then allowing this sort of gold leafing to really elevate the work, to change the way that we see this very simple and consumer object in space. I especially think through this floating format, this idea of the hanging sculpture. You begin to see the way in which he's using this language of breathing, so aspirate, to breathe. This idea of kind of levitation, allowing it to become this kind of bird-like form. And then you see here again these elongations of the bodies, these sort of alien-esque forms of Alejandro, somewhere between conversation and repose. And outside the space, we have Nemesine by Ante Lu. So this one is a combination of different forms of the packaging material that Ante became so known for incorporating into his work. We have this really clear cast form of the styrofoam packaging where a lot of the work comes from. And this has been cast into bronze and then painted with an automotive white paint. Which then finishes us here at Pygmalion. So this by Ante Lu is a form in carved walnut where it's these two halves that almost look like a Brancusi kiss, but I think a lot about the Alejandro work. Again, this kind of difficult conversation between two halves, this sort of polarizing opposites that we have here, yet still intertwined. Bathroom again. Well, thank you everyone for joining on our little brief bathrobe tour of the AE2 show. It'll be on our Facebook watch and everything, so you can watch it again. And if you have any questions, just let us know, give us a write, give us a call. Happy to answer anything you might want to know about Alejandro or Ante's work. I'm so glad that we were able to put the two artists together. It's an interesting thing, the way that they have this kind of ongoing dialogue, but neither of the artists knew their work before this exhibition. It was kind of the first time that they'd ever been presented together, and there's just this wonderful dialogue that happens between the painting practice of Alejandro and the sculptures of Ante, where they're both looking at this idea of the end of modernism and kind of the dissolution of utopias and incorporating something of a distant space, this idea of something sort of alien and unfamiliar. So if you can, make an appointment, come by, see the shows. We'll love to have you.